This interview with Farid Zakaria and Amy Walter, a well-known journalist, gave me pause. I want you guys to listen to this, and then let's go ahead and take it on the other side.
Biden is a genial guy. He's pretty mainstream, and he has passed two very large pieces of legislation, and $1 trillion infrastructure bill. We've been waiting for 20 odd years for this. The COVID relief bill. And when you poll most of the key aspects of those bills, they're pretty popular. So to me, at least, this does present something of a puzzle.
Right. So I think you have to go into the mindset now for just a traditional regular voter who is somebody who's not spending a whole lot of time following politics, thinking about politics. They pretty much have a low opinion anyway of Washington and people who work in Washington. What they're looking for is what's going on right now in my own life, and how are people whose job it is to be public servants, how are they making it better or worse? And what I hear in focus groups is just a feeling of a sort of malaise. People say that they're disappointed or they're anxious or they're frustrated. They feel as if, right, we're still sort of trapped in this COVID cycle. We can't seem to break out of it. It continues to impact everything from childcare to schools to what's available on the shelves. Inflation is a real problem, and it's pinching people's pockets significantly. So I think at its core, Fareed, what happened was over the course of the spring and the summer of 2021, you had voters looking at a president who seemed to be fulfilling all of those things he said he would do as president, right? But then the summer came, and the summer brought a dose of really harsh reality. It was like a real punch in the gut, right? You get the Delta variant coming and really disrupting all those plans for COVID to be over. Inflation really starts to hit. Obviously, the pullout in Afghanistan and the fallout there. And voters started to look now and say, well, the guy that we thought was going to be in charge of taking care of the staffer, who was the competent one, suddenly isn't looking so competent anymore. And once you lose voters on a question of competency, it's hard to get them back until you can prove that you are able to, to handle just the basic stuff.
All right, the first thing that I want to talk about is the first thing that she said was so true. Americans, they're busy. They don't have time to really sit back and figure out and learn about the minutia. But you know what? In a real system where truth abounds, where you have a free press, they shouldn't have to, because there is a press that ostensibly will be telling them the truth, that ostensibly would be informing them, that ostensibly would be telling them when a politician or private enterprise or whatever tries to screw them. That is what the fourth estate should be doing, the media. So Amy Walter goes out and she talks as if this press is a passive observer of Americans' thoughts, the thought process of Americans. But here's the truth. They are the ones who instigated the thought process in America as it is. I mean, she talks about everything seemed to have been going fine before, he got his two bills passed. Everything worked fine. But then came Delta. And Delta put things all back, it made it, the disease came, it disrupted the economy, it did all these things. True. But how was that reported? That was not a Biden's failure. That was really a failure of not only that we got a variant, but it was a failure of Republicans not pushing their people to get vaccinated so that it would have slowed down the infection rate. It's a failure of capitalism, where instead of getting that vaccine and vaccinated the entire world to really slow down on the spread so that the economy could thrive, they didn't want to do that because they had to make money. There are issues that are real, and that a large percentage of Republicans, politicians, were encouraging their people not to follow mandates, were encouraging their peoples not to get vaccinated. That's a part of the story. That isn't incompetence on the part of Biden. Did Biden and those guys make mistakes by saying, oh, things are going to be better, quicker, etc.? Of course they did. But why? Had people followed the rules, gotten vaccinated, had people do what they needed to do, things would have been much better. She fails to come out and say inflation. She just talks about, well, he cannot control inflation. Do you want government control of inflation, or do you want the private sector control of these things? I mean, we could zap on price controls right away, but we leave that alone. As opposed to the press saying it is the inflation is mostly caused by the incompetence of the private sector. Americans don't know that, but it's a fact. They're the ones who created just-in-time inventory, which screws you if you have a pandemic or screws you if you have a delay in the supply chain. They're the ones who instituted, we are going to do things, we are going to manufacture most of our stuff overseas. They're the ones who instituted that. The private sector is directly responsible for inflation right now. It is directly responsible as well with Republican politicians and recalcitrant Democrats for all these things that are occurring. And the media has failed terribly in telling Americans the genesis of our real problems. So when Amy Walter goes on TV and says, well, Americans are souring on the president, they are souring on the president not because of things that are mostly in his control, but mostly things that are in the control of those who are sabotaging the American people, numero uno, and numero dos, those corporations who are taking advantage of Americans. And if the media reported accurately, then the president would have its due. It is utterly impossible that Americans could possibly think Donald Trump's poll numbers should be similar to that of someone like Joe Biden. And that I'm not even a huge Joe Biden supporter. But it just shows you the effect of horrendous and terrible mainstream media and right-wing media coverage. It is simply terrible. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.